what if curiosity isn't just harmless? What if one small question has the power to change everything? My story isn't about love, but about the fine line between desire and regret. They say curiosity killed the cat well. Curiosity changed my life forever. Before I dive into my story, I want to thank everyone who supports my writing. If this story intrigues you, make sure to subscribe for more. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman to question our marriage, let alone jeopardize it. I was married to Paul, a good man in every way. He was loving, hardworking, and the kind of husband many would dream of. But sometimes, even a strong marriage can feel routine. It started with a harmless thought, just a fleeting curiosity. One evening, while scrolling through my phone, I came across an article titled, "Does Passion Fade Over Time?" It was typical clickbait, but something about it caught my attention. As I read, I couldn't help but reflect on my own life. Paul and I had been together for 10 years, and while our connection was strong, the excitement we once had seemed to have settled into predictable comfort. The article planted a seed in my mind. It wasn't that I was unhappy, but I couldn't shake the thought. Was I missing something? That question lingered for weeks, growing stronger with time. It wasn't something I could discuss with Paul, not because he wouldn't listen, but because I didn't know how to explain what I was feeling. One night, after Paul went to bed, I found myself reading personal stories, online stories of people who had rediscovered excitement in unexpected ways. It was like opening Pandora's box. I told myself I was just curious, just exploring perspectives. But curiosity, as I would learn, has a way of pulling you in deeper. Eventually, wondering wasn't enough. I wanted to feel something new, something different. I convinced myself that it was harmless, just an experiment in understanding emotions. So I joined an anonymous discussion group where people shared their experiences about reigniting passion in their lives. It felt exhilarating, like stepping into a world I had never known existed. That's when I met Jake. He was charismatic and confident, someone who spoke about life with a passion that was infectious. Our conversations were lighthearted at first, just two people sharing thoughts. But as the days passed, I realized I was looking forward to our chats more than I should. There was an energy to them, something that made me feel different, alive. At first, I convinced myself it was harmless. It was just conversation, just a new perspective. But emotions don't always follow logic. Soon, our talks became deeper, more personal. I found myself sharing things I hadn't even admitted to myself before. Jake listened in a way that made me feel truly seen. Then came the moment that changed everything. Jake suggested meeting in person, not for anything more than coffee, just to talk. My heart raced at the thought. I told myself I was only going to confirm that this was nothing more than friendly conversation. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the full truth. The day we met, I felt a rush of nerves. We sat in a quiet cafe, just two people talking, and yet the connection was undeniable. For the first time in years, I felt a spark, something I couldn't ignore. We talked for hours, and by the time I left, my world felt different. I went home to Paul that evening, his familiar embrace wrapping around me. He asked how my day was, and I smiled, telling him it was fine. But inside, I knew something had shifted. I had crossed a line, not physically, but emotionally. And sometimes that's even more dangerous. I had told myself it was a one-time thing, but one meeting turned into another. I felt a thrill I hadn't known in years, but with it came an overwhelming guilt. I still loved Paul of that, I was sure. But I was also drawn to the feeling of being desired, of being seen in a new way. As time passed, I realized the real danger wasn't just in the meetings. It was in what they revealed about me. I wasn't looking for someone else. I was searching for a version of myself that I had lost. I had mistaken excitement for fulfillment, when what I truly needed was to rekindle the connection in my own life. One evening, after yet another conversation with Jake, I came home to find Paul waiting with dinner ready. "I thought I'd surprise you," he said, his smile warm and genuine. At that moment, the weight of everything I'd been doing hit me all at once. Here was the man who had stood by me through everything, the one who loved me unconditionally. And yet, I had been chasing something fleeting, something that was never meant to last. I realized then that the thrill of curiosity could never replace the depth of love and commitment. That night, I made a choice. I ended my conversations with Jake, not because he was the problem, but because I had finally understood what I truly wanted. It wasn't about chasing something new. It was about rediscovering what I already had. Paul never knew about the thoughts that had crossed my mind, the paths I had almost taken, but I knew, and I vowed never to let curiosity lead me down a road where I could lose what truly mattered. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing isn't what we seek, but what we risk leaving behind. And for me, the lesson was clear. Love isn't about constant excitement. It's about choosing each other day after day, even when the thrill fades. Because in the end, love isn't about finding something new. It's about remembering why you chose each other in the first place. I had never imagined how complicated life could become. Jake and I started off innocently enough, but soon it became clear that there was something between us that I couldn't ignore. Every time we met, I felt more drawn to him. He made me feel seen in a way I hadn't expected. But the reality of my situation weighed on me, especially when I thought about my husband, Paul. Paul was everything I could have hoped for: steady, loving, reliable. Yet, something about my connection with Jake sparked something inside me that I didn't know was missing. It wasn't just physical. It was the way Jake made me feel alive, daring, and important. But the truth was that I was living a double life. My home life with Paul was perfect from the outside. I was the loving wife, the person he trusted completely. But inside, I was becoming someone else. The more I saw Jake, the more I pushed my own limits. The lies started coming easier, and I was walking a dangerous line. I convinced myself that no harm was being done. After all, Paul didn't know, and I wasn't hurting anyone. But every text from Jake made my heart race. Every glance at my phone reminded me of the secret I was keeping. It wasn't just about Jake anymore. It was about me. I was changing, and not always in ways I was proud of. One afternoon, Jake and I had a serious conversation. "You know, this can't last forever, right?" he said. His words hit me harder than I expected. We both knew the risks of what we were doing, but I wasn't ready to face the reality of it. Not yet. At home, I continued to play my part. I smiled at Paul, made dinner, and laughed at his jokes. But underneath, I was unraveling. I was addicted to the rush of my secret life, to the escape it gave me from the mundane. But as time passed, it became harder to ignore the truth. Jake wasn't just a distraction. He was making me question everything I had. And that scared me. One day, as I sat in my car after another meeting with Jake, I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. Who was I becoming? Was I really the person I wanted to be? I loved Paul, I truly did. But with Jake, I felt something different, something exciting. The choice I had to make wasn't just about the two men. It was about who I was becoming. Was I willing to risk everything for something uncertain? That night, as I lay next to Paul, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living this way. The next time I saw Jake, I told him the truth. It was hard, but I knew it was time. I loved my husband, and I had to be honest with myself about what I wanted. Jake didn't argue. Instead, he gave me a quiet, understanding nod. "I get it," he said. "I hope you find what you're looking for." As I drove home that day, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had made my choice. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was the right one. My life with Paul, our love, our trust, was worth more than anything else. When I walked through the door that evening, Paul was there, smiling as usual. I hugged him tightly, feeling the weight of everything I'd been carrying. He didn't need to know everything,